Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 26. And the man knew Eve his wife, and she conceived, and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man with the help of Jehovah. And again she bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto Jehovah, and Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And Jehovah had respect unto Abel, and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And Jehovah said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shall it not be lifted up? And if thou doest not well, sin coucheth at the door, and unto thee shall be its desire, but do thou rule over it. And Cain told Abel his brother. And it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him. And Jehovah said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now cursed art thou from the ground, which hath opened its mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee its strength. A fugitive and a wanderer shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto Jehovah, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the ground, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer in the earth. And it will come to pass that whosoever findeth me will slay me. And Jehovah said unto him, Therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And Jehovah appointed a sign for Cain, lest any finding him should smite him. And Cain went out from the presence of Jehovah, and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived, and bare Enoch. And he builded a city, and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Irad. And Irad begat Mehujael, and Mehujael begat Methushael, and Methushael begat Lamech. And Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of the one was Adah, and the name of the other Zillah. And Adah bare Jabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents and have cattle, and his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all such as handle the harp and pipe. And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, the forger of every cutting instrument of brass and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And Lamech said unto his wives, Adah and Zillah, Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man for wounding me, and a young man for bruising me. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For said she, God hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, for Cain slew him. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enosh. Then began men to call upon the name of Jehovah. Explication of Genesis chapter 4. Genesis chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And Jehovah had respect unto Abel, and to his offering. Abel's offering is described as coming from the firstlings of his flock, meaning the best and firstborn animals. The inclusion of the fat thereof indicates the richest portions, symbolizing a wholehearted and sacrificial act of worship. This offering reflects Abel's reverence and faith in God, as he willingly gives his best. God's acceptance of Abel's offering suggests that it wasn't just the nature of the sacrifice, animal versus produce, but the heart behind it that made it pleasing to him. This is supported by Hebrews 11:4, which states that Abel offered his sacrifice by faith, making it acceptable to God. Abel's offering is a model of genuine worship, motivated by faith and a sincere relationship with God. But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. Cain, in contrast, brings an offering of the fruit of the ground, Genesis 4:3. While the text does not explicitly criticize the offering itself, the implication is that Cain's heart, attitude, and approach to worship were flawed. God's rejection of Cain's offering reflects that true worship requires more than external actions. It demands sincerity, humility, and faith. Some interpretations suggest that Cain's offering, unlike Abel's, lacked the spirit of giving God the best. Where Abel's offering was marked by sacrifice and faith, Cain's might have been given out of obligation or with a divided heart. 1 John 3:12 reinforces this idea, stating that Cain's actions were evil, while Abel's were righteous. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. Cain's reaction to God's rejection of his offering reveals his inner character. Instead of reflecting on his shortcomings or repenting, Cain becomes angry and dejected. His countenance, expression, or demeanor falling symbolizes both his jealousy toward Abel and his bitterness toward God. This response highlights the destructive power of unchecked emotions like envy and anger. Rather than turning to God for guidance or seeking to improve his offering, Cain allows his frustration to fester, leading to disastrous consequences later in the story. Genesis 4:8. Genesis chapter 4 verse 8. And Cain told Abel his brother. This phrase suggests a conversation between Cain and Abel. While the exact content of this discussion is not included in the text, it implies that Cain engaged with Abel before the murder. Some translations render this as Cain said to Abel, "Let us go out to the field," indicating a premeditated act. This highlights Cain's deliberate planning, showing that his anger had hardened into a desire for vengeance. The verse underscores the breakdown of brotherly affection. Instead of seeking reconciliation or learning from Abel's example, Cain allows his jealousy to fester, ultimately leading to betrayal. And it came to pass, when they were in the field. The setting of the field suggests a place of isolation, away from others who might intervene. This detail emphasizes the secrecy and intentionality of Cain's act. The field, often associated with work and provision in earlier verses, becomes the backdrop for violence, reflecting the far-reaching corruption of sin. What was meant to sustain life now becomes the setting for its destruction. That Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. The phrase "rose up" conveys sudden violence, indicating the culmination of Cain's anger and jealousy. His actions reveal the destructive power of unchecked emotions, as what began with anger and envy, Genesis 4:5-6, escalates into murder. The repetition of his brother emphasizes the horror of the act. This wasn't a conflict with a stranger, but with someone intimately connected to him by blood and relationship. The fratricide represents the ultimate betrayal and a tragic breakdown of family bonds. Cain's act is not only a violation of his brother's life, but also an offense against God, as Abel's life belongs to the Creator. This act underscores the gravity of sin, which not only affects the individual, but also ripples outward to harm others and disrupt God's created order. Genesis chapter 4 verses 9 and 10. And Jehovah said unto Cain, "Where is Abel thy brother?" God's question to Cain parallels his question to Adam in Genesis 3:9. Where are you? In both cases, God is not seeking information, but offering an opportunity for confession and accountability. By asking, "Where is Abel thy brother?" God emphasizes the relational connection between the two. Abel is not just another person. He is Cain's brother, underscoring the gravity of the betrayal and the violation of familial trust. This question invites Cain to reflect on his actions and take responsibility. But instead of repentance, Cain responds with defiance. And he said, "I know not. Am I my brother's keeper?" Cain's response is both a lie and an evasion of responsibility. By saying, "I know not," he denies any knowledge of Abel's whereabouts, despite being fully aware of what he has done. The rhetorical question, "Am I my brother's keeper?" is laden with sarcasm and defiance. Cain rejects the idea that he has any obligation to care for or be responsible for his brother. This denial contrasts sharply with the biblical principle that humans are called to care for one another, especially those with whom they share a close relationship. Cain's attitude reflects the impact of sin on relationships, not only between humanity and God, but also among individuals. Instead of love and concern, there is indifference and hostility. And he said, "What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground." God's question, "What hast thou done?" mirrors his question to Eve in Genesis 3:13. It is a direct confrontation of Cain's guilt, revealing that God is fully aware of his crime. The phrase, "The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground," is a powerful metaphor for divine justice. Abel's blood is personified as crying out to God, demanding recognition and retribution. This highlights the sacredness of human life and the fact that God is deeply attuned to the injustices committed against his creation. The ground is significant because it was meant to sustain life, Genesis 1:29-30, but now bears witness to the first murder. This imagery foreshadows the ongoing consequences of sin, where the earth itself becomes defiled by human violence, Genesis 6:11-13. Genesis chapter 4 verses 11 and 12. This curse is deeply personal to Cain, as he is a farmer, Genesis 4:2, who depends on the ground for his livelihood. Unlike Adam's punishment in Genesis 3:17-19, where the ground became difficult to cultivate, Cain's relationship with the ground is entirely broken. It will no longer yield its strength to him, reflecting the consequences of his violent actions. The earth is personified here, emphasizing its role as both a witness and participant in Cain's crime. The ground swallowed Abel's blood, making it complicit in testifying against Cain's guilt. "When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee its strength." This statement reflects a significant consequence for Cain, whose identity and livelihood are tied to farming. The ground, once a source of life and provision, is now unresponsive to his efforts. The futility of Cain's labor represents the broader effects of sin, where work, instead of being fulfilling, becomes fruitless and frustrating. This echoes the theme of broken harmony between humanity and creation, introduced in Genesis 3. For Cain, this punishment is particularly severe, as it denies him both sustenance and a sense of purpose tied to his occupation. "A fugitive and a wanderer shalt thou be in the earth." Cain's punishment extends beyond the land. He is condemned to a life of wandering and instability. This fugitive status is both physical and spiritual. Physically, he is cut off from a settled life, forced to roam the earth. Spiritually, he is alienated from God and community, bearing the burden of guilt and shame. The punishment of becoming a wanderer reflects the broader theme of exile in the Bible. Just as Adam and Eve were exiled from Eden, Cain is now exiled from his community and the stability of his work. This punishment underscores how sin disrupts not only relationships, but also a sense of belonging and rootedness. Genesis chapter 4, verse 14. And from thy face shall I be hid. Cain's statement indicates that he understands the spiritual consequences of his sin. To be hid from God's face means to be cut off from God's presence, favor, and fellowship. This parallels Adam and Eve's exile from Eden, Genesis 3:23 to 24, but carries an even deeper sense of spiritual alienation. This separation from God reflects the devastating effect of sin, which not only damages relationships between humans, but also creates a barrier between humanity and God. Cain's words express the agony of being spiritually distant from the Creator. And it will come to pass that whosoever findeth me will slay me. Cain's fear reflects his awareness of the gravity of his crime and the likely consequences. Having killed his brother, he anticipates retribution from others. While the text does not specify who might harm Cain, it suggests the broader human instinct for justice or revenge. This fear may also hint at the growth of humanity beyond Adam and Eve's immediate family, implying a developing human community with a sense of justice, even if not yet codified. Cain's concern shows the consequences of sin on a communal level. His actions have made him not only guilty, but also vulnerable, showing how sin isolates individuals from relationships and creates cycles of fear and violence. Genesis chapter 4, verse 15. And Jehovah said unto him, Therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. God directly addresses Cain's fear of retribution. Genesis 4:14. Despite Cain's guilt, God does not permit others to take justice into their own hands. This reflects God's sovereignty in administering justice, reminding humanity that vengeance belongs to Him. Within Romans 12:19, the term sevenfold signifies completeness or fullness in biblical language. God's promise of sevenfold vengeance serves as a strong deterrent, emphasizing that any harm against Cain will face serious consequences. This demonstrates that even though Cain is guilty, God's protection is still extended to him, showing that His mercy can coexist with His justice. And Jehovah appointed a sign for Cain, lest any finding him should smite him. The sign God gives to Cain has been the subject of much speculation. The text does not specify what the sign is, leaving its nature open to interpretation. It could be a physical mark, a symbol, or even a form of divine protection, visible to others. The purpose, however, is clear: to prevent others from killing Cain. The sign serves as a tangible reminder of God's protection and sovereignty, marking Cain as under God's jurisdiction despite his sin. This underscores the sanctity of life, even for someone guilty of murder. This provision ensures Cain's survival, allowing him to live out the consequences of his actions while being protected from further violence. It also prevents the escalation of violence and the cycle of revenge that his crime could provoke.